The stranger beneath the trees. The sun was setting low over the pine-covered hills, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The golden light filtered through the leaves, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Keanu Reeves had been hiking alone for 3 days now, taking time off from the spotlight to reconnect with nature and himself. He carried only a small backpack, a water bottle, a folding knife, and a notebook where he scribbled his thoughts. The wilderness gave him peace. It was quiet, real, and honest, unlike the fast-paced world he often found himself in. As Keanu followed a narrow path along a rocky ridge, he paused to watch a red-tailed hawk glide overhead. He smiled softly to himself. It was in these moments that he felt grounded, like he could hear the rhythm of the world. But that peace was suddenly broken by a faint, sharp cry in the distance. It wasn't an animal, it was human. Keanu froze. His heart jumped. The cry echoed again, this time a little louder. Someone was out there and they were in trouble. Without hesitation, he turned off the trail and pushed through the thick underbrush, branches scratching at his arms and legs. He moved fast, guided by instinct and adrenaline. The forest grew denser, darker. The ground became uneven, tangled with roots and stones. Still, he pressed on. After 10 minutes of moving swiftly, Keanu stumbled upon a clearing near a shallow stream. There, half hidden in the grass and curled up in pain, was a young woman. She looked pale and drenched in sweat, her breathing shallow. One leg was twisted awkwardly, and a deep, purplish mark swelled just above her ankle. Beside her lay a broken walking stick, and scattered near her were signs she had fallen. Loose dirt, snapped twigs, a small first aid kit tossed open. Hey, are you okay?" Keanu asked, kneeling beside her gently. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain. Snake? It bit me." Keanu's gaze snapped to her leg. He recognized the swelling immediately, snake bite. And from the color and the speed of her symptoms, it was likely venomous. Maybe a rattlesnake. He looked around. They were at least a day's hike from the nearest road. There was no cell service here, no quick way to call for help. But Keanu didn't panic. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Jenny," she whispered. "Okay, Jenny, I'm Keanu. I'm going to help you. You're not alone." She nodded weakly, tears forming in her eyes. Keanu dug into his backpack and pulled out a bandana. He wrapped it a few inches above the bite, not tight enough to cut circulation, but enough to slow the venom's spread. He washed the wound gently, with clean water, then elevated her leg on a rolled-up jacket. His mind raced through everything he knew about snake bites. He had taken survival training for one of his films years ago, and he remembered the basics. He wouldn't try to suck out the venom. It was a myth, and could make things worse. The key now was to stay calm, keep her still, and find a way to get help. But night was falling fast, and they were deep in the woods. Jenny wouldn't survive a full night alone with venom in her system. "I need to get you out of here," Keanu murmured, mostly to himself. "I can't walk," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, don't leave me." "I won't," he promised. "I'll carry you if I have to." Keanu tore a strip from his spare shirt and crafted a rough sling. Then, lifting her carefully into his arms, he began to walk, slowly but steadily, through the dense forest, heading in the direction he had come. Every step was deliberate. He didn't want to jostle her leg too much. She leaned against his chest, barely conscious, whispering apologies and trying to stay awake. He talked to her as he walked, his voice soft and constant. "You're going to be okay, Jenny. Just hold on. We're going to get you help. I know it hurts, but you're strong. You've made it this far, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you." As the sky turned from gold to navy and stars began to appear, Keanu kept going. The weight was heavy, but he didn't slow down. He kept walking, over roots, under branches, through the cold. They stopped only once. Keanu gently laid her down, checked her pulse, and gave her a sip of water. Jenny's eyes opened for a second. "Why are you helping me?" she asked weakly. Keanu looked at her, his eyes kind. "Because someone helped me once, And now it's my turn. He picked her up again and continued forward, step by step deeper into the night, driven not by fame or fortune but by compassion. And that was just the beginning. Into the dark unknown, the forest had turned into a world of shadows. The trees now loomed like ancient guardians, their branches creaking gently in the wind. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting silver slivers of light that barely reached the ground. Keanu Reeves moved forward with steady determination, carrying Jenny in his arms. Every step was a battle. Against the cold, against fatigue, against the creeping fear that time was running out. His breath came in slow, controlled patterns. His boots crunched over fallen twigs and leaves, but he made sure not to stumble. Jenny had slipped into a semi-conscious state, her head resting on his shoulder, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her body felt heavier by the hour, but Keanu didn't let go. He had made a promise. He would carry her out of this forest if it took all night. He whispered to her, his voice calm and low, as if trying to keep her tethered to the world. "Stay with me, Jenny. You're doing great. Just keep breathing, okay? I've got you." The night dragged on like a long echo, stretching each moment with uncertainty. Keanu's mind raced silently with every step, calculating how far they were from his original trail, wondering if they were getting closer to help or only deeper into the wilderness. But he couldn't stop to doubt himself. He had to believe that his instincts would lead him back. As they climbed over a fallen log, Jenny stirred, murmuring something unintelligible. Keanu paused and shifted her weight, checking her forehead. It was damp with sweat and she was trembling. "Hang in there," he whispered again, brushing her hair away from her face. "You're stronger than you know." As he walked, Keanu remembered a time in his own life when he had been broken, when grief had carved holes in his soul, and the world had felt like a place of sorrow. He thought of the people who had helped him without asking for anything in return. Strangers who had offered a word, a smile, or a hand when he was lost. This was his moment to pass that light forward. The woods began to thin slightly, and Keanu spotted the faint outline of a ranger trail he had passed earlier. He turned toward it, recognizing the pattern of stones and the gentle slope that curved downward. It was the first sign he might be heading in the right direction. Still, he knew they wouldn't make it to the highway before morning. Not like this. After another hour, he found a small overhang of rocks that formed a natural shelter. It wasn't perfect, but it would shield them from the wind. Carefully, he laid Jenny down on his jacket and placed his pack beneath her head. He lit a small fire using dried twigs and a lighter he had kept in a waterproof pouch. The flame was small, but it was enough. Warmth and light, a fragile, flickering hope. Keanu wrapped Jenny in his spare blanket, then sat beside her, feeding the fire and listening to the quiet sounds of the night. Owls hooted in the distance and the rustle of animals echoed in the brush, but he didn't flinch. This was their sanctuary now. Jenny's lips moved slightly. "Are we safe?" she asked, barely audible. "Safe as we can be," Keanu replied. "We'll rest here. At first light, I'll get you help." Her hand found his sleeve and held on weakly. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer with words, just placed his hand over hers, firm and steady. Keanu stayed awake the entire night. He didn't let the fire die, didn't let his mind drift. He watched over Jenny as if she were his own sister, making sure she kept breathing, making sure she knew, somewhere in her half-conscious world, that she was not alone. When the first light of dawn crept into the forest, painting the trees in hues of blue and gold, Keanu gently packed up their things. He lifted Jenny again, more carefully this time, mindful of her leg. She was still feverish, but the swelling hadn't worsened. That gave him a small sliver of hope. By midday, they reached the base of the hill where the old ranger trail crossed paths with a stream. Keanu recognized the spot instantly. There had been a wooden signpost here, although it had long since rotted away. He followed the stream's curve, knowing it would eventually lead toward a ranger's cabin about 3 miles further west. He had stopped there on his first day, taken shelter during a sudden rain. It wasn't manned year-round, but sometimes it was stocked with emergency supplies and, if he was lucky, a working radio. The hours bled together as he trudged forward, legs aching, arms trembling from the effort of carrying another human being for so long. But he didn't stop, not once. As they neared a clearing, the sight of the small cabin nestled between two pine trees made his heart surge. It looked abandoned, but intact. He knocked on the door once, twice, then pushed it open. Inside was dusty but dry. He laid Jenny down on the cot and went straight to the emergency box mounted on the wall. It creaked open, revealing exactly what he hoped. A radio. He flipped the switch. Silence. Then static. He adjusted the dial slowly until a faint voice broke through. "Ranger Station, this is Unit 12, over." Keanu leaned into the mic, his voice firm but clear. "This is Keanu Reeves. I have an injured woman here. Snake bite victim. Urgent. Medical assistance needed. We're at the lookout cabin west of Iron Pine Trail. Please respond." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, now sharper, more alert. "Copy that, Mr. Reeves. Helicopter is en route. ETA 30 minutes. Hang tight." He exhaled deeply and turned back to Jenny. Her eyes were closed, but her breathing had steadied. "Help's coming," he said softly, brushing her hand once more. "You're going to be okay." For the first time in hours, Keanu let himself rest. Not fully, but enough to feel the weight of hope settling in. They had made it this far. They had defied the odds. And still, the most powerful part of the journey was yet to come. The woman behind the wound, the rhythmic chopping of helicopter blades began to echo across the tree line, slicing through the silence like a promise. Keanu stood outside the cabin, squinting against the morning sun as the bright yellow search and rescue chopper appeared in the sky. A ranger waved from the open door, and within moments, the aircraft hovered down, its landing skids crunching softly against the forest floor. The wind from the blades kicked up leaves and dust in all directions, but Keanu didn't flinch. He stepped forward, waving his arms toward the doorway of the cabin where Jenny lay motionless. Paramedics jumped out and rushed to her side, lifting her carefully onto a stretcher. One of them turned to Keanu, speaking loudly over the roar of the rotors. "How long ago was she bitten?" "Last evening, around sunset," Keanu answered, his voice calm but tired. "You kept her stable all night?" "Yes. Water, elevation, no movement." The medic's eyes widened slightly, impressed. He nodded before turning back to assist his team. Within minutes, Jenny was secured and lifted into the helicopter. Just before the door shut, she stirred and glanced around. Her gaze found Keanu, her hand weakly lifted toward him. He moved closer, took her fingers in his and gave them a squeeze. "You're going to be fine now," he said softly. "You're safe." Her lips moved, but the engine drowned out her words. Still, he understood. "Thank you." Then the doors closed, and the helicopter lifted off, rising into the sky until it disappeared behind the treetops. The clearing fell silent once more. Keanu sat down on the cabin steps, exhaling deeply. His body ached. His arms, legs, and back burned from the strain of carrying her for miles. But it was more than physical exhaustion. It was emotional. The wilderness had demanded everything from him, and now, in the aftermath, he felt strangely hollow. He watched the sky for a long time. Birds returned to their nests. Squirrels skittered along branches again. It was as if the forest had exhaled too, resuming its timeless rhythm. After a while, Keanu gathered his pack and began the long walk back toward the main trail. There were no crowds to greet him, no cameras, no flashing lights. Just the forest, and the sound of his footsteps on dirt. 3 days later, he stood outside the hospital room in a small-town medical center, dressed in a plain hoodie and jeans. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. He just asked the front desk for Jenny, and the nurse had smiled in recognition. "Room 204. She's been asking for you." Keanu stepped inside quietly. Jenny lay in a hospital bed looking far better than when he last saw her. Her leg was bandaged and elevated, but the color had returned to her face. She was awake, her brown eyes brighter now, filled with life. and questions. As soon as she saw him, she smiled. "You came." "Of course I did," he replied, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone poured poison into my leg and then dragged me through a jungle. But alive. Thanks to you." Keanu chuckled softly and pulled a chair beside her bed. "You're stronger than you know," he said. Jenny stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Why? Why did you do all that for me? I mean, I was just a stranger. And you? You're Keanu Reeves." He looked down at his hands for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because I've been where you were," he said finally. "Alone, in pain, thinking no one would come. But someone came for me once. A man I barely knew. He didn't owe me anything, but he sat with me when I was broken. So now, when I hear someone cry out, I go." Jenny's eyes shimmered. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," he replied. "You fought. You stayed alive." She was silent. For a moment, then her voice turned softer. "I was hiking to clear my head. I had just ended a long, terrible relationship. I felt like I didn't matter to anyone. I wasn't sure if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. But then, you showed up, and you didn't just save me. You made me feel seen." Keanu reached over and gently placed his hand on hers. "You do matter, Jenny. More than you know. Don't ever forget that." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Most people see you as a movie star, but out there, in that forest, you were just a man with a heart. And it saved me. Keanu didn't reply. He didn't need to. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't feel empty. It felt full. Of gratitude, of understanding, of something deeper than words. The nurse peeked in to check vitals but quietly stepped back when she saw them talking. Jenny's recovery would take time, but she was already healing, far beyond her body. As the sun began to dip behind the hospital's horizon, casting orange and purple hues across the sky, Keanu stood up. "I'll come check on you again," he said. "But something tells me you'll be back on your feet before you know it." "I believe that now," she said, her voice stronger. "Because someone believed in me first." He gave her one last smile and turned to leave. Jenny watched him go, her heart beating with a new kind of strength. One born not from survival, but from the kindness of a stranger who reminded her that she was never really invisible. And somewhere down the hall, Keanu Reeves walked quietly into the evening light, never needing a thank you, never asking for recognition. Just content knowing that maybe, just maybe, he helped someone remember how to live. The ripple of kindness. 2 weeks had passed since the day Keanu Reeves carried Jenny out of the forest. 2 weeks since the forest floor felt his steady footsteps and the wilderness echoed with his quiet courage. But what he didn't know, what he never expected, was how that single act of compassion would begin to ripple outward far beyond that mountain range, touching lives he would never meet, and changing the course of more than one destiny. Jenny had been released from the hospital with a crutch and a prescription for physical therapy. Yet what she carried more than anything was a heart filled with determination. The pain had been real, the venom nearly fatal, but so was the transformation that followed. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was living again. Something inside her had shifted. The woman who entered the forest full of heartbreak had not returned the same. She began to write, every day, without fail, about what had happened. Not just the facts, but the feelings. The fear, the comfort, the quiet power in Keanu's eyes as he whispered that she would be okay. And slowly, her journal turned into something bigger. She decided to share her story. Not for fame, not for attention, but because she knew there were others who had felt invisible, broken, alone in their struggle. She uploaded her first blog post with trembling hands, titling it, "The Man Who Carried Me Back to Life." She left out the part about who he really was, calling him only a quiet hiker with kindness in his eyes. She wanted the story to be about what he did, not who he was. And yet, within days, the post began to spread. Readers from all over the world found themselves moved by her words, commenting things like, "I cried reading this and this gives me hope again." A journalist from a local paper reached out, then a national magazine. And soon, without her even realizing it, the story had found its way to a wide audience. But what surprised her most was not the media, it was the people. Strangers emailed her. They shared their own stories of despair and recovery, of unexpected help from unlikely places. Some had nearly given up. Others had been struggling for years in silence. Her words, born from pain, had become a lifeline, and all of it had started because one man decided to walk toward a cry for help. Meanwhile, Keanu remained unaware of the growing wave his actions had caused. He had returned to his modest home near the edge of the hills, away from the noise of the city. He wasn't looking for attention. He hadn't even told his manager where he had been. He spent his mornings hiking, his afternoons reading, and his evenings watching the sky change colors. One quiet morning, as he sipped coffee on his porch, an old friend named Marco visited him. Marco had known Keanu before the fame, back when they were just two guys in a small acting class dreaming big and living humbly. He sat down next to Keanu with a grin and handed him a folded newspaper. "You should see this," he said. Keanu raised an eyebrow, took the paper, and unfolded it. On the front page was the headline, "The Hiker Who Saved My Life," followed by a black and white image of Jenny from her hospital bed, smiling faintly. His heart skipped. "She wrote about it?" he asked, reading further. "Not just wrote," Marco replied. "She sparked something, man. People are reaching out to each other, donating to search and rescue teams, organizing first aid workshops. There's even a fundraiser started in her name for wilderness safety training. It's spreading. And she didn't even tell them it was you." Keanu sat back slowly, the wind brushing through the pine trees nearby. He didn't smile, but there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Good," he said quietly. "That's how it should be." Marco looked at him with admiration. "You never stop. Surprising me, man." Keanu shook his head. "It's not about me. She's the one who held on. She's the one who chose to live. All I did was walk toward the sound." But Marco wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and opened a short video clip. "You need to see this," he said. On the screen, Jenny sat in front of a simple white background. Her voice was steady but soft. "I think we all want to believe we'd be saved if we cried out," she said. "But sometimes the real miracle isn't being rescued. It's knowing someone chose to come for you when they didn't have to. And that reminds you that you matter. You're not forgotten." Keanu stared at the screen in silence. The message, hitting deeper than he expected. He thought back to his own past, nights where grief nearly swallowed him, days where the emptiness echoed louder than any crowd. He remembered sitting on a bench once, completely invisible to the world, until a stranger sat beside him and simply said, "You're not alone." That one sentence had been a turning point, and now he had become that voice for someone else. Later that week, Keanu decided to visit Jenny again. She was in a local park, sitting on a bench with her crutch leaning beside her, a notebook in her lap. She was scribbling something with deep focus. When she looked up and saw him, her face lit up. "You found me," she said, smiling. "Not hard," he replied. "Your story kind of made its way across the country." She blushed. "I didn't mean for it to." "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." They sat in the silence of the park, surrounded by families, birds, and the hum of life. Jenny handed him the notebook. "I'm writing a book," she said. "Not about the snake bite, about healing, about remembering your worth. I think people need that." Keanu flipped through the pages and nodded slowly. "They do." As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the grass, they sat side by side. Two souls who had crossed paths in the darkest part of the forest, now sharing the quiet power of survival, of empathy, of new beginnings. And while the world kept moving, while stories rose and faded, There was something unshakable in the stillness between them, a truth that couldn't be written in headlines or echoed in applause. When you walk towards someone's pain, when you carry another through their worst moment, you don't just save them. You remind them they were worth saving in the first place. Echoes through the valley, autumn arrived gently, cloaking the hills in a blanket of amber leaves and cooler winds that whispered through the trees like secrets too old to remember. The forest where it had all begun stood still and quiet, the same as it had always been. But everything around it had changed. In the valleys below and the cities beyond, the story of a woman saved in the wild had become a quiet revolution. Not one marked by protests or parades, but by soft gestures, silent decisions, and hearts beginning to remember what kindness looked like. Keanu Reeves had gone back to walking the forest trails, less out of habit now and more out of reverence. The wilderness had always been sacred to him, but now it held a deeper meaning. Every fallen branch, every curve of the trail, felt like a place where courage had been tested. Not just his courage, but hers. He wasn't alone this time. Jenny walked beside him, still using a walking stick now and then when the ground grew unstable, but her steps were stronger. Her voice, once trembling and shy, now carried the tone of someone who had found purpose after the storm. She had decided to return to the forest where she nearly lost her life, not out of fear, but to reclaim it. And Keanu had offered to go with her, not as her rescuer, but as her friend. They didn't speak much as they hiked. The silence was comfortable, full of understanding. Birds chirped above, and the sun filtered through the trees in soft golden beams that lit the path ahead like a guide. After an hour, they reached the clearing by the shallow stream, the very spot where Keanu had first found her, curled in pain and near collapse. Jenny stepped slowly to the place where the grass was still slightly bent, where the memory lingered like a faint scent in the air. She looked down, then slowly sat on a flat stone nearby. "I remember thinking I was going to die here," she said, her voice calm but reflective. "I remember feeling like maybe I deserved it." Keanu crouched beside her, picking up a small, smooth stone and turning it in his hand. "What made you feel that way?" he asked gently. "I think," she said slowly, "it wasn't just the breakup. It was everything. I'd spent years shrinking myself, trying to be what others wanted, and when it all came crashing down, I felt like I had nothing left. No one would have noticed if I vanished." Keanu didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't a moment for advice. It was a moment for listening. Jenny continued, "But then you came, and not just to save me physically. The way you talked to me, like I mattered, even when I was weak, I never forgot that." Keanu looked out at the stream. "You were never weak? You were just lost? We all get lost." Jenny looked up, eyes moist but clear. "What about you, Keanu? What were you running from when you came into these woods?" The question caught him off guard. He hadn't planned to speak about himself, but something about her voice, genuine, curious kind, opened a door he had kept closed for too long. "Grief," he said quietly. "There are people I loved, people who aren't here anymore. Sometimes it's hard to live in a world without them. The silence they leave behind, it's loud." Jenny nodded. "I'm sorry. I came here," he continued, "to remember how to breathe, to remember that the world can still be beautiful even when it hurts." They sat like that for a long time. Two people who had carried different kinds of pain, but now sat on the same earth, under the same sky, healed not by forgetting, but by remembering together. Later, as they hiked back, they passed a young couple, sitting on a log. The girl had twisted her ankle. Nothing serious, but she looked embarrassed and in pain. "Do you need help?" Jenny asked. The couple nodded, surprised by the offer. Without hesitation, Jenny pulled a wrap from her bag and helped the girl bandage her ankle. Keanu smiled quietly, watching her move with calm and grace. "You're good at that," he said once they resumed walking. "You were my teacher," she replied. "You just didn't know it." That night, they attended a small community event in town. The local library had organized a talk about wilderness safety and survival. Jenny had been invited to speak. She stood at the front of a modest room, a projector humming beside her, and a dozen faces turned in her direction. "A few months ago," she began, "I thought I had no reason to live. I thought pain meant I had failed. But then someone showed me that even in the most hopeless place there is light. There is always someone willing to walk toward your pain, not away from it." She paused, then smiled softly. "And sometimes, they wear hiking boots and carry you like you're weightless even when you feel like the heaviest burden in the world." The audience was silent. Some blinked away tears. Others nodded slowly, connecting their own experiences to her words. After the talk, a young man approached her. "My sister's been struggling with depression," he said. "I didn't know how to help her, but after hearing you, I think maybe now I do." Jenny thanked him, heartful, soul steady. Keanu watched from the back of the room, his hands in his pockets, his face calm but proud. He hadn't spoken a word, hadn't stepped forward to take any credit, because for him this was never about recognition. It was about what happens when one human being answers the call of another, when pain becomes purpose, when survival becomes service, and when a single moment in the wilderness becomes the beginning of a lifetime of change. The path forward. The first snow fell late that year, as if the sky itself had waited for the right moment to lay down its white veil. Soft flakes danced quietly through the chilled air, covering rooftops, trees, and trails with a clean hush that made the world feel reborn. In the same way, something inside Jenny had been transformed, not just healed, but awakened. And somewhere beyond the snow-covered branches, Keanu Reeves walked alone again through the same wilderness that had brought them together, reflecting not on the past, but on the strange, powerful beauty of everything that had unfolded. The rescue had ended, but the journey never truly did. Jenny's book was finished now. Its title was simple but powerful, Carried. The first page contained a dedication that read, "To the stranger who reminded me I mattered, and to anyone who ever felt invisible, you are not alone." Her words were honest, raw, and filled with compassion. And the world responded. The book wasn't just published, it was embraced. Readers sent letters, emails, and stories of their own. Some spoke of trauma, others of quiet heartbreak, but all echoed a shared truth. There is power in being seen. On a quiet Sunday morning, Jenny received a call from a woman named Rebecca. Her voice trembled on the line. "I read your book," she said, "and I just wanted to tell you, you saved my life." Those words stayed with Jenny for hours. Not because she believed she was a savior, but because she now understood the delicate threads that connect all people. The unseen ties between our choices and others' chances. Kindness, she realized, isn't just a moment. It's a chain that travels farther than we'll ever know. Meanwhile, Keanu had returned to his quiet routines. He remained out of the spotlight, slipping in and out of places unnoticed, helping in subtle ways, like buying groceries for an old man in line or fixing a broken bench in a local park. He didn't need the world to know. He just needed the world to be a little softer, a little more kind. But fate had one more turn planned. A global charity event invited Jenny to speak about survival and mental health. It was hosted in a large auditorium filled with people from all walks of life, students, doctors, artists, veterans, and survivors of all kinds. The theme was simple: how one person can make a difference. When Jenny stepped onto that stage, she wasn't nervous anymore. She stood tall, her voice steady. "I was saved by someone who asked for nothing in return," she said. "And because of that, I've tried to live every day giving what I can, whether it's a word of comfort or simply listening. Because what I learned in that forest is this: no act of kindness is small. No presence is insignificant. We all carry each other, in one way or another." As she spoke, Keanu sat unnoticed in the very back row, hood up, hands folded. He didn't need applause. He didn't need to be mentioned. Just seeing her there, alive, strong, whole, was more than enough. After her speech, the room erupted in applause. People stood. Some cried, some simply nodded in silence. Outside the auditorium, beneath a canopy of stars and snowfall, Jenny stepped into the cold air, feeling the weight of her own heart. Full, open, steady. She turned a corner, and there he was. Keanu stood quietly, beneath a dim lamppost, his breath fogging in the air. He smiled. "You crushed it," he said. "You came," she replied, walking closer. "Wouldn't miss it." They walked side by side beneath the falling snow, their footsteps silent on the sidewalk. There was no need for grand speeches or emotional breakdowns. Everything they needed to say lived in the quiet between them. "I used to think strength was about doing everything on your own," Jenny said as they passed a line of parked cars covered in frost. "But now I know. It's letting others in, letting someone carry you when your legs won't move." "Strength is trust," Keanu said. "And you've shown more of it than most." They stopped near a frozen fountain, the kind you see in quiet city parks that glow under streetlights. Jenny looked up at him. "Do you ever wonder why it was you that day?" she asked. "Why you were the one who found me?" Keanu looked toward the sky, snowflakes catching in his hair. "Maybe it wasn't chance," he said. "Maybe it was. A reminder for both of us that the world still needs gentle hearts." They stood in silence, watching the snow fall in patterns only the sky could understand. And though no cameras were rolling, no crowds watching, it felt like the most important moment in both of their lives. In the days that followed, Jenny's story would continue spreading, not because she was rescued, but because she chose to rise, because she chose to turn her pain into purpose. And Keanu? He continued walking quiet trails, never telling the world what he had done, never needing to, because true kindness doesn't shout, it whispers. And long after the news moved on and the world found new stories to follow, there would still be a woman who remembered the cold forest, the pain in her leg, and the steady arms that lifted her. And there would still be a man, walking unknown paths, listening for voices in the dark, ready to answer when the world cried out. And somewhere in the distance, through the trees, the wind would carry a truth deeper than any echo. One life saved can save 1,000 more.